Hi, everyone. It's wonderful. I was going to say it's wonderful to see you. I'm sorry that I'm not there to actually see you in person, but it's wonderful that we are able to meet this way to have a conversation about today's topic, which is the Jewish calendar. And although I was going to need to be out today anyway because of the Jewish calendar, I feel like it's extra special for us to be discussing this on this day because as you are watching this, today, September 8th, it is, in fact, the Jewish New Year. That's why I'm not there. That's why we're going to learn this way today. But it's really cool because all of the things that we're going to talk about are actually coming very much to a head, like right now, not as I speak, but as you listen. Fabulous. Okay. So first of all, I hope that you have with you the calendars that I should have been able to distribute in class when we first met. And if I was not able to hand them out in person, then I should have emailed them to you. That's an interesting thing to have with, and you might want to keep that near you as we go through. And you also might want to refer to it later on. I'm going to show you some other Jewish calendars, but that's one that's just sort of interesting for you to have as we proceed. So, okay. I'm going to start first with what year it is. And the reason we're going to start with what year it is because, again, as I said, as you're watching this, the number is in fact changing. So in the American calendar, what we would call the Gregorian calendar, obviously it's 2021, but that is not the case on the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar counts differently. This is also true, by the way, of the calendar in Islam. There are many different calendars across religions. So today, as part of Rosh Hashanah, which we will talk about, but as part of the Jewish New Year, the changing of the year, it is now officially today, the year 5782. Where does that number come from? Basically, there was many efforts to calculate backwards to the beginning of creation by scholars at various moments in Jewish history. And this date was calculated by a 2nd century CE, which is a term we'll talk about just in one second, a 2nd century CE sage who through a variety of means based on biblical interpretation, sort of counting backwards from events as listed in the Bible and calculating the number of years as listed in the Bible, because the Bible doesn't go by years, it describes things in human lifetimes. So making a valiant effort to sort of work back to creation using the literal word of the Bible, excuse me, this sage figured out the year of creation or calculated the year of creation, which of course is not the year of the Big Bang, but is the year that we started counting, or the year that we count back to, and every year proceeds forward from there. So we are now in the year 5782. Okay. Another interesting note about how we talk about years when Jews are using the Gregorian calendar, which is to say, when I talk about things like 2002 or the 2nd century or 1592 BCE. So you're going to hear me use terms like BCE and CE in place of terms like BC and AD. That's because the terms BC and AD are inherently Christian. BC means before Christ, and AD means Anno Domini, which means year of our Lord, referring to Jesus Christ. And for people for whom Jesus is not their Lord, right? That's sort of a weird thing to say, and it's discomforting. At the same time, I recognize that I am part of a very small minority, and I would not go around using 5782 as the year, in my checkbook. So in order to simultaneously live in the calendar of the place where I actually live, and also to respect my own religious integrity, I, like Jews all over the place, will often use the terms BCE, which means before the Common Era, and CE, which means Common Era, recognizing that the year 0 is sort of a commonly accepted way of demarcating time without necessarily ascribing personal theological meaning to that beginning of the Common Era. That's when it is. Okay, so it's the year 5782. What else do we need to know? We need to know about the months of the Jewish year. There are 12 months in the Jewish year. And I'm going to say their names, and you're going to be able to go through and find them in your calendar. The months of the Jewish year are Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul. So there are 12 months. of the Jewish year in a normal year. Okay. That's a lot of Hebrew words, and I have no expectation that you learn all of those months, but it's interesting for you to begin to look through the calendar, and I'm going to bring in for us to look at a Jewish calendar. What I have for you is Jewish dates transposed onto a Gregorian calendar, which is a little bit different. To be able to recognize some of these months. And I'm going to always, whenever we talk about holidays, I'm going to tell you the month that they occur in, so you can sort of begin to fill out the fullness of a Jewish year. So there are 12 months in a Jewish year, 12 out of every 19 years, because as a semi-lunar calendar, or a lunisolar is what it's sometimes called, a lunisolar calendar is a kind of calendar that is primarily based on the cycles of the moon. That's the word lunar. But it is not exclusively based on the cycles of the moon. It also is attempting to fit itself into a solar calendar. So Jewish months are based on the cycles of the moon. We're going to talk more about that. But we also have a set beginning and end of the year. We have a set number of days in a year. And we are therefore sort of in the middle between something like the Gregorian calendar, which is in no way a lunar calendar, and the Muslim calendar, which is a fully lunar calendar. So in a fully lunar calendar, you in fact are not able to state 100% with surety when a holiday will begin or end, because it literally is based on the location and the stage of the moon. A Jewish calendar as a mid-place means that we do count by the moon, but we make adjustments in order to fit our years into a solar calendar. So how do we do that? We do that by having leap years, but our leap years are not like Gregorian calendar leap years. You are all familiar with a Gregorian calendar leap year, right? It's February 29th. That's the magic date. In a year that we have a leap year, we have that date. In a year that we don't have a leap year, we don't have that date. And leap years occur one time every 4 years. That is not how the Jewish calendar handles leap years. A leap cycle in a Jewish calendar is a 19-year cycle, of which 12 years will be fully regular, meaning the 12 months we talked about with no emendations at all. And 7 out of those 19 years will be leap years. But during our leap years, we had a whole extra month, not a day, a whole month. So you'll recall that list of months I gave you before. The month of Adar, which is a springtime month, actually occurs 2 times in a leap year. So when we talk about the holiday of Purim, which is the major holiday that occurs in the month of Adar, we're going to talk a little bit about what do you do in a leap year, but that is how the calendar works. So to recap, we're in the year 5782. We are looking ahead to leap years. 7 out of every 19-year cycle will have a leap year, will be a leap year, excuse me. And on those leap years, we will be adding in a whole extra month, and it will be the month of Adar. And we'll have Adar 1 and Adar 2 in those years. And that's literally what they're called. Okay. We have a bunch of New Year's. So I know I said today is Rosh Hashanah. It's the Jewish New Year. That's not why I'm with you. And today is recognized, or yesterday and today, and we'll talk about that too, are recognized as the actual beginning, the year, the time at which we change the calendar over to the next year. But traditionally, there are 4 New Years within the Jewish year, which are not necessarily celebrated as the New Year, but are always recognized as the New Year of something. And they fall seasonally. So this is our fall New Year. There's going to be a holiday in the winter that marks the New Year. There's going to be a holiday in the spring, and then a holiday in the summer. And so those quarters sort of are there to remind us that, in fact, the time is ongoing. And there are seasons to everything. And in each season, we have one of these big markers. But Rosh Hashanah is considered the birthday of the world. And therefore, it is the meaning that the world was born on this date. The world was created on this date. And therefore, this is the time that we actually change the calendar over, because this is the new year for counting. Okay, we're going to talk a lot more, by the way, about the concept of a new year, what goes into a new year, what we celebrate and what we're not celebrating, and how our celebrations might look totally different from what you think of as New Year celebrations in a secular context. But we're not going to do that today. Today, we're just going over sort of the larger ideas in the calendar. Okay. So because the Jewish calendar has this lunisolar system, which, by the way, there are many calendars, both ancient and current, that use this model that are based on the lunar calendar, but not wholly pegged to it. So it's not only the Hebrew calendar, we have good company. Because we are tied into this calendar, there is not always a good match between the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar, and I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, and you can too. Between the Jewish calendar and the Gregorian calendar, things don't always match up perfectly. They tend to match up generally, seasonally, but there's not a direct correlation because we're counting years, we're counting months, we're counting days so differently. That is why you will sometimes hear people say, oh, such and such a Jewish holiday is really early this year, or such and such a Jewish holiday is really late this year. That is true when speaking about the Gregorian calendar, but is not true when speaking about the Jewish calendar. Jewish holidays fall on the same date on the Jewish calendar every year. Those dates don't change. They might switch slightly depending on whether it's a leap year or not. Again, we'll talk about that when we talk about Purim, but they're not flying all over the place. The date for a holiday is the date for the holiday, but it's the date on this lunisolar calendar. And because we don't line up, things don't always match. So for instance, this year, I am out today because it is the Jewish New Year. It is Rosh Hashanah. It is generally the case that Rosh Hashanah falls sometime in the month of September. I guess it's plausible that it could come very early in October, but basically it's a September holiday. However, it moves in September, meaning the date on the Hebrew calendar will move in relationship to that date on the Gregorian calendar. So this year, Rosh Hashanah is quote unquote really early. It's the first week in September. In previous years, you might say, oh, it's not coming until the very end of the month of September. It's really late this year. We have adopted speaking about it in these ways, and because Jews and Jewish civilization in not only the United States, but basically the entire modern world has to live simultaneously in the Gregorian and the Jewish calendar. And so we adopt ways of thinking about it and speaking about those things relationally. But I just want to be clear, even if you hear me use that term, even if you hear other people use that term, Jewish holidays are when they are, and they only come later or come earlier because we are living in two calendars simultaneously, and they do not always synchronize well. So when we talk about the dates for holidays, our next unit is going to be, next big unit is going to be on holidays. When we talk about the dates for holidays, I'm going to always give that date to you on the Hebrew calendar, but I'm always also going to give you a sense of when it falls in the Gregorian calendar, but I'm not able to say specifically for all time when it falls. So it will be interesting as we look through the calendar that I provided for you, which is a Gregorian calendar filled in with Jewish dates, overlaid with Jewish dates. And I have also a Jewish calendar to show you that still uses the Gregorian outline, but starts in a different place in order to help us make sense of that. Okay. I want to talk about one other element of Jewish time and the Jewish calendar before we actually look at some resources together. And that is that there is another method of marking Jewish time that is important to understand, that will make more sense after we have talked about a synagogue and talked about some elements of the Jewish bookshelf. But I want to talk about it now, and I want to start to introduce this idea now. So every week in a Jewish year has a Shabbat at the end. Shabbat is the last day of the Jewish week. And by the way, of course, a Jewish Shabbat, the Sabbath, comes on a Saturday. And so a Jewish week technically begins on Sunday. In Israel, Sunday is a work day. It's a normal day. Everything is open. People go to the office, kids go to school, because there is no cultural affiliation of Sunday with the Sabbath. That's a Christian idea and therefore pretty alien to most Israelis. So Sunday is the first day of the week and Saturday is the last day of the week. Saturday is the Sabbath or Shabbat. And a good way of sort of thinking about the Jewish week is that it's all leading up every week to the Sabbath, which even though it comes every week is actually a very important, up there with perhaps the most or one of the most important Jewish holidays. In fact, because it comes every week, we're going to talk a lot more about Shabbat, like a lot. But one interesting thing to understand is that every week on the Shabbat, on the Sabbath, part of what is traditional as part of a Jewish community is that the Torah, our major religious text, or our fundamental religious text, is read. The Torah is divided up into the number of weeks in the year. And again, with special accommodations made that we can talk about if you are interested for how to accommodate the leap years, but there are special accommodations built in and things that can be done so that when it's a leap year, nothing about the system needs to change. But the Torah is divided up into these chapters, and every week has a chapter. And so one way of referring to the week in the year or to marking the week in the year is to refer to what chapter is read on that week. Because as soon as we finish the Torah, which happens on a holiday that is coming up that we will talk about, as soon as we finish, we immediately go back to the beginning and start reading again. So we are never not reading the Torah. And each week we read a new chapter, and those chapters are called, each one is called a parsha. The plural of that word parsha is parshiot. And so each parsha has a name, and the parsha is the same, and it is a selection of the Torah and usually a selection from the book of the prophets. Again, we're going to talk about all of these things, but it always comes together. It always comes as a unit, and it always comes at the same point in the Jewish year. So another way of understanding the Jewish calendar is to understand what parsha it is. And if you know the parsha, especially if you are a Jewish person who is involved, is observant, sort of has a sense of where they fall, I can say, oh, it's parshat whatever. It's the parsha of Ekev. It's the parsha of Bishalach. It's and these are all the names of chapters. And that would give you a sense of where in the calendar year we are. Again, you might not have a sense exactly of the Gregorian calendar, but you would know the Jewish calendar. And I actually want you to flip, please, to your calendar that I provided you. This comes from one of the websites that I listed as an additional resource in the syllabus. It comes from HebCal, which, by the way, comes from itself, Hebrew calendar, and which is a great way of figuring out all of these things, or being understanding like, oh, what time, what week is it? What is the parsha? What is the Hebrew date? You can always actually check. So you'll see if you look, it starts in January 2021, which obviously already passed. And it, on top of all of the Gregorian dates, it gives you the Hebrew date. So the 17th of Tevet, 5781 was the 1st of January, 2021. If you look down on, for instance, on January 14th, you'll see Rosh Chodesh. That means the start of the month. It's a holiday that comes at the beginning of each month. Rosh Chodesh Shvat, meaning the month of Tevet ended and Shvat began. And then you'll see that the month of Shvat begins counting. This particular calendar does not list the Parsha, but it does list a few special Shabbat. So you'll see if you look down at January 30th, Shabbat Shira. This is another special Shabbat that is tied to the date on the Hebrew calendar. Shabbat Shira means the Sabbath of song, and it's traditionally a Sabbath where there's a concentration on singing. As you go through the calendar, you will see the markings for this term Rosh Chodesh, which is a term you should write down and is a term I expect you to know, which also should have come up in your reading. Rosh Chodesh is the holiday that it's either a 1-day or a 2-day holiday, depending on the month. And it marks the beginning of the month. Rosh actually means head, Chodesh means month. So Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month. And Rosh Chodesh is always timed to the new moon. So when the moon is, the new moon actually means that you can't see a moon in the sky. So on a moonless night, not just because it's cloudy, but because there actually isn't a new moon. That is always Rosh Chodesh. So you'll see the Rosh Chodesh for each month overlaid, and you'll see the holidays overlaid, and you'll see some of the special Shabbatot overlaid. If you were to look on this website itself, which is hebcal, hebcal.org, you can also find it in your syllabus, you would actually see on the front page of this website that the parsha, the readings for the week, that way of counting time is actually listed right on the front. I want to go over one other element about the Jewish calendar and counting Jewish time, which helps make sense of how the calendar works. And that is a concept called Erev. Erev, and you'll see it in this calendar if you look, Erev means evening, but when we're talking about the calendar, it means the evening before. And the reason that you will see Erev, the evening before, is that a Jewish day begins at sundown. It ends at sundown and the next one begins at sundown. So if I were to ask you, like, when does a day begin? You might say, oh, a day begins at 12:01 a.m. Or you might say a day begins in the morning. The day begins when the sun rises, right? A day begins when my alarm gets off and I drag myself out of bed and eat my cornflakes, and that's when the day begins. But the date actually changes the evening before at sundown, according to the Jewish calendar, which means all holidays begin at night, because all days begin at night. The moment that the date changes over is the moment that the sun goes down. So for holidays that are big, important holidays, often the big celebration or one of the big celebrations or a special service in the synagogue will actually be the night before, which isn't before, it is the night of. But again, sort of understanding that I'm talking with one foot in each civilization. According to the Gregorian calendar, it's the night before. According to the Hebrew calendar, it isn't before anything. It is the moment of. When the sun goes down, the day changes. And so you will see when you look in your Hebcal calendar that I provided, that you will see listed Erev Purim, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev all of these different holidays. And we will go over all of these holidays. When you see that word, that day is part of the holiday, but it only is part of officially when the sun goes down. This is actually important and sort of the cause for confusion often, because if you know this information, then you know when you see a day listed in a total, sometimes in a totally secular calendar, someone will include holidays that are not just Christian holidays, but will include other holidays. But the holiday does not actually begin on the day that it's listed, because it's listed on a Gregorian date. It begins Erev, the night before. Okay, I want to just show you briefly a Jewish calendar that is not, it uses a Gregorian like overlay, because that is really the only way. There are such things as Jewish calendars that don't have any Gregorian calendars attached, of course, but if you are living in a society that uses the Gregorian calendar, it's much more useful to know what the overlay of Jewish and Gregorian dates are, as opposed to knowing that information totally in a vacuum. So what am I talking about? Here is you will see a Jewish calendar will always have 2 years, because a Jewish year begins in the fall, and a Gregorian calendar begins in the winter. So in order to accommodate both of them, usually Jewish calendars are sold as 15-month calendars, not always. Sometimes they run September to September. Sometimes they'll run September all the way through December of the following year, just in order to make things easier for the people who are using them, who have to, again, sort of live with multiple New Years, their religious New Year and their secular New Year. So 2 years, but only, so 2021 and 2022, but only 5782. This is, I pulled this off of my refrigerator to be able to show you. So you'll see that it's September 2021, but here we see that this says Elul, the last month of 5781, and goes through Tishrei, the first month of 5782. And these are the names in Hebrew and written in Hebrew letters, which I'm happy to model for you at another time, but you just need to see them. Here you will see the dates listed actually in Hebrew letters. Every Hebrew letter also has a numerological value, and so dates can be written out in Hebrew letters, and sometimes words will be made out of them, or phrases, mnemonic devices, anything like this. But here we have, you'll see, Erev Rosh Hashanah, because on a Jewish calendar, they know that that's the important date. You need to know that because you need to know when the holiday actually begins. So Erev Rosh Hashanah, September 6th. So the evening of September 6th, which is just a couple of days ago, is when the holiday began, and it runs 2 days. So if you are watching this, which I hope you are, on September 8th, the holiday will end tonight after the sun has gone down. You will see a lot of holidays. We're going to talk about this. There's a lot of holidays in the month of Tishrei this month, which accounts for some of why your September schedule is a little bit wonky. But you will see always Erev is listed. And if you will see also Rosh Chodesh is listed on this calendar. And for each month, they're showing you it's the Gregorian month because that is the most useful information, but the overlay is always there. So this is Tishrei and Cheshvan of this year. We've moved fully into 5782 come October, but 2 Jewish months span that month of October. I think that is all we need to see. I will also say you'll see this calendar begins on a Sunday, and it lists the Hebrew days of the week. The Hebrew days of the week are very easy to remember once you speak some basic Hebrew because they're just labeled first day, Yom Rishon, second day, Yom Sheni, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and then Shabbat. Shabbat is the only day that gets a name. And so always a Jewish calendar will begin on Sunday and end on Shabbat because that is how a Jewish week functions. Okay, I think we're going to leave it there for now. We are going to talk a lot about all of the holidays that populate this calendar, and I'm very happy at the beginning of our next class to set aside a few minutes for you to ask questions about the calendar, but I would encourage you to take a little bit of time, look through the calendar I sent you, see what pops out at you, see how the interplay of the 2 calendars may or may not be related, and please go over the terms that I used in this talk today so that you are able to best integrate this information. I am excited to see you soon, and thank you so much for accommodating my new year. Have a good one.